I was operating from scarcity quite a bit in my life. I grew up with the same programming that we all get as Americans to crave things that we don't need that we think are going to make us happy. I had a poster of a Lamborghini on my wall as a kid, and I ultimately got the Lamborghini. And it was fun, but it was not nearly as much fun as knowing that you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do in this lifetime. Like, I'm just having so much fun right now doing what I'm doing, even though what I'm doing is daunting.
That's Brett Hurt. 5 companies, 6 exits, 151 investments, 12 unicorns, and a Lamborghini he didn't need. Now, most people with that resume would write a business book, but Brett has written something more urgent because that question, what am I building this for, is the question we should all be asking ourselves right now. Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell. Brett co-founded data.world, launched Bazaarvoice to a unicorn IPO, and wrote the new book, Love Conquers Fear: Humanity, AI, and the Age of Abundance for All. Today, you will learn why leading with love and not fear is the only strategy that works in the age of AI. You're going to hear about Brett's arc from chasing Lamborghinis to a psychedelic awakening that changed everything, and why AI isn't here to replace you, it's here to make you more human. That's why I'm so excited you're here with us today and this important conversation with Brett Hurt. Hi, Brett. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, all the way from Ireland, too.
I know it. And you were carving out time from your 30th anniversary trip with your wife, Deborah, to be with us today. So we appreciate that.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I got that decision right.
Smart man. Smart man. But it's great to be here. You've got this book that is just launching, and the timing couldn't be better considering all the fear and anxiety wrapped around AI, that you are taking that head on through your experience as a tech entrepreneur, as an investor, and your own experience of turning fear into love or overcoming fear with love. So give us a little bit of backstory. How do you find yourself at this intersection?
Yeah, so I've been a long time technologist. I've started 6 different companies as an entrepreneur. Fortunately, I've had great success. It's a real product of a mom putting a tremendous amount of love in me, learning my passion when I was age 7. That's when I started programming. My mom learned how to program with me. And then growing up in Texas, she kept everybody out of my way. There were a lot of people that told her that she was ruining me, that all I knew how to do was program and there was going to be no future in this. And, why am I not playing football and doing the things that other, Texas kids were doing? And I was obsessive about it. I programmed over 40 hours a week from age 7 to 21. That led to me being at the right place at the right time with the right passion and becoming a successful entrepreneur. I started to really think about how do I give back. And initially, that started with investing in startups. My wife, Deborah, and I are investors in 151 startups now, as well as
Wow.
52 VC funds. And 12 of those companies that we seed backed are now unicorns. We're also investors in SpaceX, so that's going to be a big IPO, really historically the largest IPO in history, $75 billion raise if they actually pull that off in a couple of days from the time that we're recording this, which I suspect they will. I've heard the demand
Right.
for the IPO is very strong. And it really, you know, got me thinking a lot more about how do I give back? And this moment that we're in with AI, I felt the ground quake when ChatGPT launched on November 30th of 2022. I grew up like many tech entrepreneurs reading a lot of science fiction. Most science fiction tends to be pretty dystopian. I was a big fan of Isaac Asimov, which tends to not be as dystopian as much of it. And, reading sci-fi growing up, I was one of those kids that was like, I want to create a better world than they're depicting here. I thought the tech was really interesting. And the medium that I decided to do that with was capitalism. And I would say that I'm a conscious capitalist. You've read my book now, and chapter 9 is on capitalism. And I find it very interesting that OpenAI has converted to a public benefit corporation now and filed to go public. Anthropic started their life in 2021 as a public benefit corporation. These are the fastest growing companies in history. Anthropic is now around a 47 billion ARR annual recurring revenue company. And OpenAI just surpassed a billion active monthly users. And so you have the two fastest growing companies in history that are going to go public probably this year. They both been quietly filing to do so with the SEC. And they're both public benefit corporations, which is a really good sign because I run a public benefit corporation. My last company was a PBC. It was called
And how do you
data.world.
define how do you define a public benefit corporation?
Yeah, so some of the more famous ones are companies like Patagonia. Everybody's heard of Patagonia, and it essentially means that you have a charter that is a protected charter for the company, and that shareholders invest in the company knowing that that's the deal. And it means that you are beholden to a public good, and nobody should invest in your company if they're not willing to sign on to that public good. So it gives it legal protection for the public good that you're striving to serve as a company. You're still a for-profit company, so you're not a nonprofit, but it it puts you in a position where you can try to do more good for the world. And so again, I find it very heartening that the two biggest AI companies and the two biggest companies of any type in history, in terms of their growth rates, are PBCs. That's a really, really
Yeah.
good sign. So when
Now
when
the cynic might argue, Brett, though, that these companies are doing that just to mask the scariness of AI in a lot of people's minds, the fear that they've got for AI. Do you feel like they are legitimately pursuing the B Corp position?
I do.
Mhm.
I don't think I'm being naive on that. They're putting out extremely thoughtful pieces. You have Dario Amodei putting out pieces like The Adolescence of Technology, which is a deeply thoughtful piece. I actually cover, that he recently put that out in my book coming out, which is called Love Conquers Fear, Humanity, AI, and the Age of Abundance for All. And, that he doesn't have to do that, right? I mean, he's doing that because he really cares about humanity meeting this moment. You have Sam Altman now putting out similar pieces to that. You also have a lot of people coming in to really talk about the importance of humanity meeting this moment, from Mustafa Suleyman, who's in charge of everything AI at Microsoft. He is the co-founder of DeepMind, which I'm sure most of your listeners have heard of. Google acquired them. They were most famous for creating AlphaGo, which beat the best Go player in the world by just recursively, constantly training against itself on how to play Go and coming up with novel moves that the world had never seen. And then Demis
Mhm.
Hassabis, who is other co-founder of DeepMind, is the head of everything AI at Google now. And he recently won the Nobel Prize for AlphaFold, which decodes protein folding, which means that we're going to get to a world of an unlimited number of medicines that will help us cure disease. Because once you understand proteins, the building blocks of life, you can understand how to create medicines to solve every disease that's known or diseases to come. So these are really good things that are happening, that people are putting out these very thoughtful pieces. And then you have people that you wouldn't maybe have expected to really put out a prayer for humanity. Henry Kissinger's dying work is a book called Genesis. And he finished writing that about a week or two before he passed away. Like he didn't even get to see the book be released. He was 100 years old. And he co wrote that with Eric Schmidt and Craig Mundy. And that's a incredible book. The last chapter is his dying prayer for humanity to meet this moment. So I think that we're having a consciousness awakening. People are waking up to really meet this moment. That doesn't mean that there's not risk. One of the
Hmm.
longest chapters in my book is chapter 11 on the risk that we face. The biggest one being nuclear weapons. We've created real weapons. These are not toy guns. And a lot of people are shocked to know how few of those it would take to destroy almost all of humanity and send the world into a nuclear winter for a decade. And this would be like that moment in the Matrix. If you watch that moment in the Matrix where they busted through the dark skies and the cloud to see the sun again for the first time in a long
Hmm.
time. Well, that's what would happen. The world would be covered in darkness. We would shiver and freeze to death if we didn't die from the nuclear weapons. And the shocking statistic is that just 2% of today's world nuclear arsenal, 2% would do that. It would destroy almost all of humanity and kill untold numbers of animals and plants. And that is really scary. It means that humanity has produced 50 times more of these weapons than it would be needed to have a near extinction event, if not an extinction event. And, you know, there's an acronym for this, and it's called MAD, stands for mutually assured destruction. So we have this disease that we need to overcome. It's the fear-based center of our brain. We've only
Hmm.
had electricity as Homo sapiens for 0.1% of our evolutionary time. So, and that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that all Homo sapiens alive today have electricity. I personified the country Chad in the book, which has 21 million people. It's located in Africa, and only 1 in 8 of them have electricity. And so, for us to create a future for people that are in Chad as well as everyone on the planet, it really requires us getting this moment right, having a consciousness upgrade. And that's why the book is called Love Conquers Fear, because that name is in all of the spiritual text, whether it's Bhagavad Gita, whether it's the Tao Te Ching, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Torah or Kabbalah, Buddhism, Hinduism, etc., all has this common spiritual root. And we're 99.9% genetically identical across this beautiful jewel of a planet. And so it's really up to us to unite and for humanity to have unprecedented abundance. And, for those of that are listening that think that's not going to be possible, humanity does really bad things, I would just say that you're right. There are many times. I mean, I'm Jewish. There was the Holocaust. It has taken us as Jewish people more than 80 years to get back to the population that we were pre-Holocaust. Okay, so we're about 16 million worldwide in a world of 8.2 billion humans. But at the same time, remember, two things can be true at the same time, which is one of my favorite sayings on my own podcast called Love Conquers Fear. We, if you go back 250 years ago, 90% of all of humanity did not know how to read, and 80% was living in abject poverty, near starvation. Okay, that was 250 years ago. Now, like I told you, we've had electricity for around that same amount of time. So electricity changed a lot of things. And what's going to happen with this exponential curve that we're in, what I call the superfecta in the book, which is, the combination of AI, quantum computing, robotics, and brain computer interfaces, is that as we ride up this exponential curve, we're going to be able to see abundance that we cannot fathom today in 2026. We're going to be able to decode the energy of the sun, 18 seconds of the sun's rays that fall on the earth today. If we just had the material science breakthrough, let's say that our deep mind comes out with an alpha material science project, I guarantee you they're working on something like that. Necessity is the mother of invention. We have to solve energy. 18 seconds, if we could capture it, would power America's energy needs for over a year. 18 seconds of the sun.
Yeah.
So we have God put a fusion reactor in the sky for us to just figure out how to plug into and stop using quote unquote dinosaur
Well, you just
juice.
have to get over big oil. I mean, that's going to be the big thing. We're locked into this economical situation where we've got big oil commanding the attention of our politicians and everyone else, and yet, renewables, the sun, nuclear, even is clean, inexpensive energy compared to dirty, expensive energy that we are all experiencing at the pump. But this is the business of story. So let's pivot just a little bit
Sure.
from your awakening that went on from the tech world that led you to create this Love Conquers Fear platform and now writing of your book, and this idea of how you could instruct or help our listeners use AI to be able to share and scale their most authentic human voice. So let's begin with your awakening. What went down there?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been studying different modalities of awakening for a long time. I studied Vedanta, which is it actually predates Hinduism in India. It's a philosophy about how to be happy as a human being, and we've got these brains which are pretty hardwired. Like I said, the fear center is very strong. We choose to suffer a lot. You said that we're locked in. I would actually say we're not locked in at all. It's just a mental construct. We're
Exactly.
not locked
Yeah, but
in at all.
that
Like
can
we
be a
can,
powerful mental construct.
it is a very powerful mental
Yeah.
construct. And there's lots of constructs. There's man versus woman. There's my race versus your race. There's my religion versus your religion, my generation versus your generation, my political party versus your political party, my country versus your country. All of these are illusions of separation. We are one humanity on one planet. It took us more than 50 years to get back to the moon, and we didn't even land on it. And I love Artemis too, and I love James Webb, and I love the things that NASA can do and that SpaceX can do. So I was a seeker. I grew up constantly praying, and especially when it was those very hard times as a child, being picked on for being a nerd, or those very hard times as an entrepreneur where it could have gone one way or another, and I had to will it back on the tracks. Being an entrepreneur is very much a journey on the inside as well as outside. You have to make really tough decisions sometimes. And sometimes you just want to curl up in a ball and just, say, stop beating on me. And you can't do
Mhm.
that. You can't have a quote unquote bad day. You've got to, you've got to recover very, very quickly as an entrepreneur, and you have to will things into existence. George Bernard Shaw said that all progress depends on the unreasonable man or person. It's the right way to say that because there's plenty of amazing female entrepreneurs that I know. And so for me, the Love Conquers Fear journey actually came through a psychedelic journey. And I know that your listeners may, want to shut the computer right now if they have a certain construct in their mind about psychedelics. The Nixon administration was where the war on drugs began, and psychedelics have been around for a long time. Plant-based medicine has been used for thousands of years. There's a great book your listeners should read called The Immortality Key. It's by Brian Rescue, who's a friend of mine. He was on episode 48 of Love Conquers Fear. And he traces back that the original wisdom schools were places where you had to gain entry after a certain amount of wisdom was accumulated in your life. And people like Aristotle went there and they drank from a magical chalice. And we know now that psychedelics were a part of that brew. And they were having a direct communion with God. And for me, um, psychedelics were an awakening to actually meet God. And God is also a trigger word for people. Look, I think God and consciousness are synonymous. I think God and the intelligence of the universe are synonymous. I don't think that we can understand the nature of God. God is ineffable. God is nameless. God is formless. But that's what I've said in my journeys, and that's what I've met. I've met this force where you're surrounded by radiant light and unconditional love, and people get there all different types of ways. They can get there via meditation. I have lots of friends who have had a near death experience where they've felt that unconditional love of God. People can get there through active prayer. You know, they can have a spontaneous spiritual awakening in prayer. I've had some friends who have been suffering and then have an incredible awakening without ever having done psychedelics in their life. Pariah Beam was on episode 31 of my podcast. She's one of the best biotech entrepreneurs in the world, and she tells that story. So I'm going to be honest about the way that I got there. And it's a really interesting time for psychedelics because now President Trump has fast tracked through an executive order psychedelic assisted therapy, primarily to help suffering vets. So Deborah and I are involved in Americans for Ibogaine. Ibogaine, I've never done a Ibogaine journey, just to be clear. It's the most powerful psychedelic. I don't have the type of PTSD that would require it, but we should have a heart for our veterans. They fought for our country, and we've lost 4 times as many veterans since 9/11 to suicide than combat. 4 times as many.
That's amazing.
And then we have
Mhm.
people that are, really chronically addicted to opioids that are just caught in a vicious cycle. Brian Hubbard was on episode 53 of my podcast. That's his big why. He's the CEO of Americans for Ibogaine. And, the way to wake someone up out of that can be through psychedelics. And the same thing is true of an alcoholic, a chronic alcoholic that just cannot shake it. And so we're starting to rediscover what the indigenous people knew that, frankly, Western society largely demonized. We largely demonized indigenous culture, which knew how to use their bodies and minds better than we know how to use them today. And, we're
Mhm.
suffering in a country where our GDP is $86,000 a person versus Chad, where it's $660 a person, and we're suffering from depression and loneliness in a country where we have more abundance than any other country on earth. And why? Because we have this system where it's put profit over people. And what I mean by that is the social media algorithms, which are constantly trying to hijack us to be afraid and to fear each other. um, the media, which is constantly pushing stories that keep us clicking like a mouse in a maze looking for the cheese. And that's not a critique of the free press. It's a critique of the business model. A lazy form of capitalism is to study the base nature of the brain and then try to scare the hell out of people. So, like coming out with a book like Love Conquers Fear about how is humanity going to make it and how are we going to awaken ourselves is actually a harder sell than Eliza Yudkowsky's book, which literally the title said, "If we build it, we will all die." That became a bestseller because that's like me shouting, "Hey, there's a bear," and everybody looks, right? Or there's a fire
Yeah.
in the theater. And it's just a ridiculous notion because the Terminator and the Matrix scenario are not what we have to worry about, in my opinion. What we have to worry about is ourselves. We have to worry about a humanity that will build 50 times the amount of weapons that we need to destroy ourselves, and a humanity that will create zero sum power based games. And we absolutely can transcend those. And as you know from my book, there's a lot of case studies, what I call the new models for humanity, about how we've done it before. And technology, what I saw through my psychedelic journey, is that technology is the forcing function for us to do so. And I actually quote from that journey in chapter 13 of my book, which is that chapter is called The Inner Journey. And it was the divine coming through me saying, this is what humanity needs to do. And I know that people may hear that and think this guy's crazy or whatever. But there's been all types of people throughout history who have had a communion with the divine and written some of the most, you know, um, beautiful spiritual texts that we all read. The Bible
Mhm.
is the number one book that's read worldwide. It is outsold every other book, right? And
Yep.
and it is a book largely about the inner journey. The mantra of Christianity, and I'm using mantra lightly. It's a Sanskrit word. A Christian wouldn't say it that way. Is that the kingdom of heaven is found within? Well, what does that mean? That means if you want to be a part of the change that humanity needs, you yourself must go through a journey, a rite of passage, if you will. And you can get there through Stoicism as well. You don't even have to believe in God. Um, and you can get to the point where all these profits over people systems have no effect on you. Like, I don't watch pornography. I don't drink alcohol. Alcohol is nothing more than a poison. It has a social utility, but we're just constantly programmed to say that it's okay to drink alcohol, but oh man, don't try psychedelics and try to have a direct communion with God. And all the studies on psychedelics, if you actually look at them, what Johns Hopkins and other universities have put out, is phenomenal in terms of how it actually changes you to be the best version of yourself. So I'm going to be very honest with people. And frankly, in the business community, I can tell you, because I know that community the best, so many people in the business community and leadership positions have done psychedelics. They're just not willing to talk about it because they haven't gotten to the point where love has conquered their own fear to the point where they feel like they can. um, and that's going to change really quickly now that Trump and others are really starting to say, "Hey, let's look at this. Like, there's real potential here to help humanity heal." Um, but again, there's lots of ways to get there, and my book talks about lots of
Mhm.
different paths.
So was this your crossing of the threshold? I mean, you went on this trip, and then you came out this other side and built the platform, Love Conquers Fear. Before that, you were a very, very successful tech entrepreneur, investor, and so forth. Were you operating from fear even while you were building this, great legacy?
Yeah, so Park, I was operating from scarcity quite a bit in my life. I grew up with the same programming that we all get as Americans, to crave things that we don't need, that we think are going to make us happy. I had a poster of a Lamborghini on my wall as a kid, and I ultimately got the Lamborghini, and it was fun, but it was not nearly as much fun as knowing that you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do in this lifetime. Like, I'm just having so much fun right now doing what I'm doing, even though what I'm doing is daunting. I'm trying to help humanity have a consciousness upgrade, and I'm not alone. This is not a world savior complex. Like I said, there are many people that have the same calling that are in much more powerful positions than I'm in AI. But I ultimately got every material thing that I wanted and went to the top of the capitalist mountaintop. And I found out that the thing that mattered the most, and I started to learn this through Vedanta, but psychedelics really hammered this home, was the beautiful journey that I've been on as a human being to try to create a better world through technology. And I wish I could say that I got there earlier. I didn't. That doesn't mean that I didn't lead with a lot of love. My prior companies were rated among the best places to work in Austin. The company I took public for over $1 billion valuation was rated the number one company in Austin when it was small, then medium, and then large. But my internal, clock was running quite a bit, quite often on fear, on scarcity, thinking, wow, now I'm going to have this $1 billion IPO, and that ultimately will be the thing that makes me, happy forever. And you realize that so much of life is about the journey. It's about the journey and the relationships and the way that you led with love and the love that you received. And if you study people that are on their deathbed, I've got this fascination with reading articles about that, as well as wisdom from people that are passing away. It's all about love, and that's in all the scriptures. It's in all the scriptures. It's always been there, staring at us right in the face. And we're having a spiritual renaissance across the world, which is really cool. But that doesn't mean that it's institutionalized religion. It's different. Spirituality is this common root that we all come from. The realization that we have a soul, the realization that we can lead with love, that love is the highest vibratory force in the universe. And then there's certain aspects of religion, I'm like I said, I'm Jewish, that I love. There's certain practices in Judaism that are great, or practices in Christianity, or practices in Hinduism. And then there's certain that aren't. In the Bhagavad Gita, which I encourage anybody to read, you'll find that there's so much similarity between whatever religion you follow. But it starts out with the caste system. And there's no way that God would say to humanity, hey, Park, sorry, you're not going to be able to marry your wife because she's in a different caste than you. Or you're not going to be able to have this job because it's not appropriate for your caste. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like, the base state of humanity is that we all want freedom. We all want to have the choice to do what we truly love, the beautiful light that we can bring to this world to lift each other up, no matter what that is. And everybody has a role. Everybody is born for a reason. And from lifetime to lifetime, you're ultimately growing to manifest more and more love in the world. And we're at that penultimate moment for humanity where it's technology is a forcing function for us to choose what we want to be when we grow up. And that means that we can embrace abundance for all, but we're going to have to get over the constructs that, and there's lots of ways that we can get there.
How can we get out of the fear of artificial intelligence and embrace it with what I call more of artful
Yeah.
intelligence and have it really, you know, amplify our authentic human centered voice through our stories? How can we use AI for our powerful human storytelling?
Yeah. I think that AI can actually help you become more human, not less. I was at TED this year. I go every year, and at TED this year is just a beautiful gathering where the past couple of years at TED have been a little bit more dystopian on the AI front. People very fearful of the Terminator, the Matrix scenario. This year felt different. This year felt like, hey, we're getting our footing. Humanity's creating something new and learning how to work with it. And there was a woman on stage showing artwork that was absolutely stunning, that everybody agreed there was not possible to create prior to AI. It is something new. And she was showing it, and it is just absolutely beautiful. And she's creating these art pieces that are derivative of nature, um, and the unfolding of flowers, for example, which nature is the best teacher,
Mhm.
right? Nature's had billions of years to evolve and perfect itself. The Japanese, when they created the subway system in Japan, which anybody that's been to Japan knows how efficient that is, they used mycelium. Mycelium, the mushroom networks that connect all the trees, is the largest organism on Earth. It's underground, and it's a janitor of Earth as well. Like, it's incredibly intelligent network, and so they used it to just see like where the mycelium went, um, to form the most efficient path for their subway system. They learned from nature, and so
Mhm.
you have this artwork that was just stunning, but trained essentially on nature. And then she shared with us that she's coming out with her first album. And this is a woman who is either in her late 50s or early 60s. And she's like, I never thought that would happen in my lifetime. And it was beautiful music. You know? And she was only able
And
to do
all
that.
AI
Yeah, she
created?
was only able to do that. And that was a partnership, right? It was human and AI. And
Mhm.
AI is going to allow us, if we use it wisely, and it's all up to us. Just like when we discovered fire, we could use it to do really horrible things, or we could use it, which primarily most of us did, to cook our food, create bigger brains, warm our caves back then, etc. So she's using it to become more human, to achieve these dreams that she's wanted. And it's an expression of her art. And all artists throughout history have gotten inspiration from each other. And so, you know, I actually think that we can become more human in the age of AI. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is we do not understand what the nature of our own consciousness is. You know, consciousness is the basis for every experience we have. It's the basis of everything that matters. And Anil Seth this year gave his second consciousness talk at TED on why AI will not become conscious and how intelligence and consciousness are two different things. You know, think about the smell of a rose, you know, that lingers, or the experience I had today in Ireland of one of the most beautiful hikes I've ever been on in the Mourne Mountains. You know, there was a part where I saw the valley and the lakes where it just looked like the most beautiful painting I'd ever been in. And I was like, I can't even believe I'm here witnessing this absolute majesty of nature. Um, so there's so much at stake, and we need to have more communal time, and we need to stop doing jobs that don't give us joy. And there's a lot of people that really just work to make a paycheck so that they can survive. That's not going to allow them to bring out their best expression as a human being. And we need, you know, robots, and we need unlimited energy, and we need AI to become more efficient so we can get back to being more human. Like, on the other side of this curve is abundance and community that is hard for us to imagine today. But I described it, you know, in detail on the book, and we can absolutely get there.
Mhm. Yeah. And well, of course, we're using our Story Cycle Genie AI to help advance human centered storytelling. And we ran your brand through it just to give you an
Yeah.
example of hopefully something that you're talking about in your book, Love Conquers
Yeah.
Fear. And, I make the argument that artificial intelligence is the worst brand name ever because, that's scary. Artificial intelligence is going to come to kick my ass. But when you use it properly with the human intelligence, it becomes, and as you identified from the TED speaker who created the beautiful art, it can be
Yes.
artful
Yeah.
intelligence.
Absolutely.
In a very short amount of time, what did when it ran your brand narrative strategy there, you got a chance to take a look at how effective was it? Was it clear? Was it something that you could use?
It is something I could use, yeah. Yeah, it was very effective the way it separated out 3 different personas for the audience that I'm reaching, was really masterfully done, and I learned quite a bit from reading that. And, you know, I get asked this question often, like, "Who is your audience?" And I, you know, talk about how it's leaders having a heart shift that then that'll cascade amongst us, but it's also individuals saying, "Look, we want that world of abundance. We don't want to just be, we don't want to be consumers. We don't want, you know, to have this world of profits over people." Um, and you know, you through the brand story, really intelligently showed the different personas and how I should be focused on them, and creating the audience as the hero. And it is true that the book is trying to give every single human being the courage to lead with the agency that they have. We all have free will to create the world that we want. And AI is the ultimate forcing function and enabler for that because look, we're just 3.5 years since the launch of ChatGPT. And every week of tech progress right now feels like a year 10 years ago. And 10 years from now, every hour is going to feel like a week today, because that's what an exponential means. And that can sound scary to people. And it is if we lead with fear, because the same tools that can create abundance can be used to destroy us. But as we start to glimpse the frontier, like think about like we're looking over the curvature of the earth and the moon's in the background, but in this case, the moon is the destination. It's abundance. Humanity is going to be able to see that more and more as we progress and is going to demand it. And it would be very hard for you and me to imagine how India would change if we were living under the rule of the British until Gandhi came along. And so a lot of people say, well, how are we going to get there? It doesn't take that many human beings to change the world. And AI gives them the most powerful tools they've ever had to do it. And most people are wired for good. Like most people really care about creating a better world. They care about having love in their relationships. They're not walking around like terrorists, who were programmed since they were very young to hate and to kill. Fortunately, that's a very small percentage of the population and of humanity. Most people like want very similar things. They want to have a very loving life. They want to have great relationships. They want to do a job that they love. They want to have, kids that they bring out the best in. That's what most people want around the world. That's the base state of humanity's yearning. And we should have great empathy and connection to all human beings on this planet, including those in Chad. Like I said, we should care about the fact that only 1 in 8 of them have electricity. We should care about the poor areas of America where the opioid epidemic has absolutely ravaged those communities and say we want abundance for them too. There's only one humanity on one planet in a universe of 2 trillion galaxies. We now know that through the James Webb telescope. And we know that just the Milky Way alone has hundreds of billions of stars and around trillion planets. Okay. And I actually think that there's life all over the universe. We just can't reach it. But we're very landlocked on this planet, and there's so much at stake. We only know what 4% of this universe is even made of. We call that matter. 96% dark energy and dark matter. We have no idea what it is. There's so many things to discover scientifically. Think about how with us discovering more and more about space allowed us to create GPS, and how revolutionary GPS has been. Things like Google Maps, for example. Like I didn't
Yeah.
know how to navigate hardly anywhere, prior to Google Maps. I was horrible at reading
Well,
regular
my
maps.
big takeaway from your book is that the embracing of tech for good and not evil, which of course we all want, except the evil people in our lives that don't, but really the majority of us. And if you are using AI, you get into generic or general AI, and it can take you down a lot of rabbit holes, maybe not intentionally, but just doesn't know everything. You can waste a lot of time with it. But what we have found, it took us 2 years to build the genie, but we have found how you can collaborate
Hmm.
and coalesce
Absolutely.
your
Yep.
intelligence, your vision, your experience, and use AI as a magnificent amplifier. And so, for instance, just what I ran for you through the genie took about
Yeah.
7 minutes. That would have taken me easily 3
Easily.
weeks of research and due diligence. So that just freed me up to go
Yeah.
hiking, to go play golf, to be with my family, to see our grandkids.
Which is amazing. Yeah.
We didn't have that technology, a year ago. We couldn't do
Yeah.
that.
I've had marketing firms. I mean, I've started 6 companies, right? And
Yeah.
run companies for 30 years of my life. And I've had marketing firms produce a brand assessment, they would call it. And
Yep.
it was not as good as what you produced. I mean that very sincerely.
Thank you. And it would have probably cost you about 20
It
grand.
cost a lot more than that, honestly. It depends on the size of the company, but I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for those at prior companies, because, I've grown some companies into quite large size. And I've seen people spend millions of dollars just to create a new logo. That wasn't me, but like really big companies. I remember when Deloitte Consulting did that back when I worked for them prior to being an entrepreneur, and I could recreate the logo literally with Times New Roman font with an underline. You it's like, wow, that's expensive.
Well, as an entrepreneur and an ad agency, past ad agency owner and a marketing consultant, that I absolutely see the power of AI for good, not evil. And I am so surprised, Brett, at how many agency principals are reluctant to bring it into their workflows.
Well, most people are afraid of it. I mean, the recent Pew report is that only around 25% of Americans are positive on AI, like think that it's going to lead to good outcomes. Now,
Yeah,
again, we have the Matrix and the Terminator grafted in our collective human psyche. And those stories, by the way, are
right.
thousands of years old. It's not just modern sci-fi. We've been talking about we're going to create machines that destroy us for a long, long time. And so that is an illusion. We have amazing agency with these tools. And what's going to matter in the future are things that are the most human. We're going to automate so much of manual labor and cognitive labor that the things that are going to be most valuable are the things that are most human. And I think that's going to lead to a very beautiful
Yeah.
world. And I actually think that this is the best time for someone that is eternally curious. Like I spend many, many hours each week looking up anything you can imagine. Like on this trip that we've been on in Ireland for our 30th anniversary, there have been so many passing curiosities that I'll just pull up ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and learn about. And those are things that would have been passing curiosities on prior trips prior to the launch of AI
Lice docent, huh?
that I would never have,
Yeah.
looked at. I would have never gone back and like gone to the library and found like where that exists, if you think about how you and I grew up.
Well, that's kind of the central theme of your book. The central theme is this can be really, really good for us. And you show you demonstrate it in your anecdotes in there and your stories. And it's a really remarkable book. Perfect timing right now. Where can people find it? I mean, it's literally publishing as we are speaking. Imagine Amazon.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
publishes on June 23rd in honor of the solstice, where the light overcomes the dark. It's available at all major retailers. You can buy it on Amazon. If you buy the Audible version, it is me reading it. That is the hardest public speaking I've ever done, by the way. I've spoken to
Right.
many, audiences over 30 years. And actually doing your own book on Audible, you have to hit the emotional chords right. You have to pronounce everything perfectly. It required a lot of retakes. I spent over 20 hours in a studio, but it's worth it because it's 100% human. It's not, there is no
Yeah.
AI
Yeah.
involved in me reading the book to you. And
Mhm.
it'd be available in Kindle and the hardcover is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's a really gorgeous hardcover. It's the highest quality print. And my purpose with this is honestly to help humanity have a heart shift. And if you think, this guy's way too optimistic, I will say that, the risks are laid out very clearly in the book. It's just that I love humanity. I believe in humanity. I believe that we can do very hard things. If you haven't seen a documentary called Unknown Cosmic Time Machine, which you can get on Netflix, it's about the making of the James Webb Telescope, which is an unbelievable invention. It took over 10,000 people to do that globally, coordinated via NASA. And we can see back literally 13.5 billion years. The universe is supposedly 13.8 billion years old since the Big Bang. And, this is a marvelous, marvelous creation, and there's just so much at stake. One of the images that I love from the James Webb Telescope is called the Pillars of Creation, and it looks like this hand of God. Probably if people are into space, they know what I'm talking about. If not, just look up on Google Images, Pillars of Creation. And each of those fingers, okay, is if the Earth is 8,000 miles in diameter. Each of those fingers is 3 billion Earths long.
Mm.
Okay, and that's just
Wow.
one tiny, 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 tiny part of this infinite universe. So, there's just so much at stake. Like, can we conquer faster and light speed travel? Let's find out. We have to survive first. We're not going to get there if we're so landlocked. We've never reconciled quantum science and classical science. We've never created a world of unlimited energy and seen what we can do with that. We've never created a world of abundance where humanity doesn't have to suffer, like people in Chad. I mean, the things that we take for granted in America, like healthcare, energy, like electricity, food, clean water, they don't have there. And there's a lot of
Wow.
countries that don't. And so we've progressed a lot in the last 250 years, as I said earlier, but there's so much farther that we can go, and a universe that's so vast and infinite that we can explore. But we don't get access to the rest of the universe if we allow fear to conquer love. Love has to
Mhm.
conquer fear for God or whatever you want to call that force to give us access to the rest of the universe. That
Yeah.
force is not going to allow us to propagate the universe with destruction and death. It's just not.
Yeah. With that, I am gonna let you get back to Deborah, your 30th
Thank
anniversary
you.
trip, more hiking. Where can people learn more about you, Brett?
Yeah, loveconquersfear.org is really the best place to learn about my background. My podcast now has 62 episodes live as of this recording with you, Park. And there's 66 episodes I've recorded, and it comes out every week on Tuesdays. I've had amazing entrepreneurs, investors, spiritual teachers, and scientists on there to hit this from all different types of angles, including people that are more optimistic than me, if you can believe that, and people that are a lot less optimistic than me. And I would encourage you to listen to both because it really takes all types hitting this from all angles for humanity to wake up and realize the moment we're in and realize the
Yeah.
stakes. And like I said, the major AI model leaders in the United States, in my opinion, are waking up, and they're waking up to not just the potential of AI, but the promise of a world of abundance for all and the stakes of this moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brett, for being here with us. Thank you for your great new book. And it'll be interesting to circle back with you in a year or two and see what's
Yeah,
developed.
for sure. Yeah, I would love to do that. It's the next 10 years are going to be the most exciting, daunting, um, years for humanity that we've ever had. And that's what, again, exponentials feel like. And I think
Yeah.
I think we will choose well. There will be things that scare people that happen. There will be terrorists that use AI to do something really destructive. But most people are wired for good, and the same tools that can be used for destruction can be used to fight against bad people that use them to try to create outcomes that hurt us all. And there are
Yeah.
many more, um, as I'll say, humans of the light that will defeat the darkness and will have the superpower to do so because of AI, quantum computing, robotics, and brain computer interfaces, what I call the superfecta.
Well, thank you, Brett. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that wide ranging conversation about how love conquers fear in this day and age of, well, scary AI to a lot of people. And that's why I want you to reframe artificial intelligence as artful intelligence, because that's where I see the abundance lying in the AI world for you, for me, and for everyone you serve. If you want to bring more art to your brand story, Visit us at storycyclegenie.ai. Now, join me next Monday when Jason Swenk is going to be here. He's the founder of Agency Mastery, host of the Smart Agency Masterclass podcast, and author of Operator to Owner. You're not going to want to miss it. Until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is a story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.